This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 489 for Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we're into. The podcast is available on all of the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. Joining me this week, Stephen is here to kick off the new year. It's Stephen ESC on all the social media that matters. Hello, sir.
Good evening to you. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a hot minute since we've seen each other. That's a lie. You were over on Saturday.
For the first time.
And we've got more to talk about that later in the show. We can actually say like, hey, we actually did a thing together, and we can talk about the things together that we did that were nerdy. But in the meantime, there's also been a few other things, mostly trailers that have popped up online that we wanted to chat about. So, and you've got these bookmarked like a studious podcast host. What do you want to start with?
Well, I watched the trailer for Riot's new Arcane spin-off show, Welcome to Noxus. Or at least that's what I thought it was. I was so excited when I first saw it. I was just trying to find out what I could, but the sites that I found were just super vague about it. And then I finally found one that said, this is the next season of Riot's game. And they based a lot of the characters. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of them. They introduced Mel and her mother's name. It's blanking on it right now.
Oh, I can't remember her name either.
Either way, Mel and her mother, they were not in the game originally, so they've been added. And they've been modeled to look like their characters from the show, where a lot of the characters in the show look different from what the game version was. And so, and apparently they've updated a couple of characters, or a few characters that I've not seen before, to look like more like the show. So, it was a little bit shiny. At first there were clues. The art style was the same. Sorry, I should say the character design was the same, but everything looked a little too shiny, and it didn't have that really cool, rough, artistic kind of quality that the Arcane show had. That made it look just really, really beautiful in every shot. But still, it was pretty impressive how close it was to the TV show.
So Fortiche is the animation company, and they're the same company that did Arcane, and that they did the trailer. So that's why it looks so similar. And Mbessa is her mother's name.
Yes, thank you.
I had to look that up. I'm not trying to be a smarty pants. I was Googling while you were talking.
That's why it's good to have two people.
I like the trailer too. I mean, I don't play League of Legends, and I mean, I say that I don't play World of Warcraft anymore either, but I still like the trailers because they're just cool. Like it's eye candy. It's promotional. It's usually
absolutely
with World of Warcraft. It's usually feel good stuff. With League of Legends, it's usually feel bad stuff. Like they're never happy. I don't see a lot of smiling happening in League of Legends trailers. There's a lot of war and fighting and grumpy people being grumpy at one another in slow motion. Very pretty visually though, and very interesting in terms of the character designs, and I'm not familiar with. I've seen a couple of them just because I went to the League of Legends website when we were talking about Arcane. I don't remember their names, but the blue troll guy, and there's a guy with an axe. He's from Noxus as well. He's one of the Noxus warlords or something. And then I think the girl with the half mask and the spider lady, I feel like those are new characters. Like they're part of they're new playable characters that you can play this season in League of Legends. I didn't really dig into the nuts and bolts of it, but it felt from what I saw from a couple of other like reaction posts on like TikTok and stuff that people were really excited to see like the new characters. At the end of the trailer, there was two characters that I recognize as being long-standing League of Legends characters. Like I saw them on the website. I think I've seen them in like lore videos because I did that lore deep dive to try to get up to speed on Arcane, and they're talking back and forth about like plots and moving forward. They reference Piltover, and it felt like it was meant to be like a Arcane tie-in. So like they're referencing the events of Arcane,
okay,
but then you don't really know what they're talking about unless you're a League of Legends player. Like unless you've been into the lore and watching these trailers and following the lore for the game for the last little while, then you don't really know who these characters are or what they're talking about or what is the weight of their conversation. And it feels
Right.
like they're moving their target, and there is a symbol on the screen at the end, and it was like a hand drawn kind of like cave painting looking type thing. And I think that Noxus had their sights on Piltover, but has now got their sights on a different area of, I can't remember the name of the world that Arcane is set in. Runeterra? And
Runeterra,
yeah, one of the areas is like a fantasy area. So that's where who's the little furry guy from Arcane? Heimerdinkle?
Heimerdinger.
Yeah, Heimerdinger. I said Dinkle. Heimerdinger. So Heimerdinger
That's what
and
it should have been. That totally should have been that.
Heimerdinger, the half cat lady with the big ears, that was spying on
Yeah.
people, like all those kind of characters are from this like fantasy realm. It's like half fairyland, half real world stuff. And it feels like Noxus, I think, and this is just me completely grasping at straws, is aiming their world domination ideas at this other place. I'm kind of wondering whether they're slowly over the next couple of years going to be pointing the story in ramp up mode towards the Riot MMO that is supposed to be coming. I am curious about that because you and I both agree that it's a very rich world, rich character design, rich in lore, complicated because we're fairly new to it as far as how long it's been around. But I would definitely be interested in giving an MMO a shot in that world. Because if I could play as like a character that is like a Heimerdinger or like Ambessa or her, I can't remember his name, but her bodyguard, like the great big guy with the pointy beard, like that would be fun. I feel like knocking some heads around in an MMO like that would be a good time. So I'm definitely curious about it. But it was a cool trailer. I like the animation and I feel like the cinematography is what made me realize I think this is Fortiche. I think I'm going to go and look this up and see who did this, because the way that characters would wipe across the camera, like the camera would be going, the camera would be going left, but the character would be going right. There's a dance sequence where a bunch of characters are like spinning and like giving like these long looks with like half masks on and stuff. Beautiful sequence, like just gorgeous and complicated. And it really just, I was like, that's Fortiche. I could just tell the storyboarding and the direction and stuff is there. But I know what you mean. It does feel a little shiny. It was not quite as gritty as Arcane.
Yeah. Like they didn't take the time to redraw every frame.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether that's like just because they wanted it. Maybe it needs to match the other trailers better. Like maybe they had to kind of go halfway in between the other trailers. Have you watched any other League of Legends trailers?
No, I haven't. Or if I had, I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. But
there's hours. Like you can look up like, all League of Legends trailers in order and just kind of watch it. It's you're not going to really know what's going on, but it's entertaining. Like it's eye candy. It's very shiny.
It makes me want to play it. Like I know that people who play the game and have seen Arcane warn people who have not played it to not play it. Like there's even a TikToker online, Wisdom K. He was going to do some high fashion posts based on Arcane characters because people have been talking about it and doing cosplay. But he posted it, and then the comments were just flooded by people who've played the game and said, "Just don't bother, don't do it. Just watch the show, get all the influence and inspiration you need from that, but don't go play it." So I don't know. I feel like I have a bit of not fear of missing out, but it's just I've heard so much about things like Doom and World of Warcraft, Fortnite, Valorant. I haven't even played Among Us. Like all of these games that were sort of these, teeny tiny video game, not pop culture, but just like they seem to be these big moments, these bursts of things that everybody was involved in or everybody's had a chance to play over time. And I've just never done it. So I feel like there's something I want to go and at least test the waters on so many of these games, but just add it to the list of things I need to do.
I know what you were doing while the rest of us were playing World of Warcraft. You were having kids. So you probably did not have the time to to look into that.
All right, that makes me feel better.
I think you would like it. I don't. So I say that not having played WoW in like 10 years, but when I last played it, I feel like it's the kind of game that you would like in
Okay.
that kind of world. Uh, I've not played Among Us. I've not played Valorant. I've seen Valorant. I'm just not very good at those team-based shooter, high-pressure PvP games because I feel like everybody else has more time to put into them than I do, and so everybody else gets better
Mm,
at them than I do, and then I feel like I'm holding up the team. So and if you're on if you're on a team with a bunch of people that are at your level, then you just get owned by another team that's just a little bit better than you. And I've
right.
never found that kind of stuff fun. But Doom, I've definitely played my fair share of first person shooters, and there's actually going to be a Doom tie-in later on. But the Doom and Doom 2 have been remastered. There's also all the new Doom, Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, which is 2019, 2021. I can't remember. Those are all on Game Pass. So if you ever want to try one, just let me know.
Yeah. Okay.
They're larger games, not the old ones, but the more recent ones are larger games, so they take a little bit to download. But give me a heads up, and next time you want to come over and hang over and play video games, then we can load up a Doom or like a Borderlands or something like that. I feel like you'd have a lot of fun with a Borderlands game. The sense of humor in those is really fun too, and those are the kind of games where they're fun to watch somebody else play too. Like I've spent a lot
Right.
of time in Borderlands, so I would be fine kicking back and watching someone else experience Borderlands for the first time. It's kind of like bringing someone into Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, you know, one of your favorite movies that you've seen hundreds of times, but they've not seen it.
Right.
And then you're just like, I'm just excited to see this person's reaction to this, you know, and
Yeah, you're just basically there for the live version of a reaction video.
yeah, 100%, 100%. So there's a few of those classics that are available on Xbox Game Pass. So we'll have to look into that. The other trailer that came out is the Daredevil Born Again trailer that's coming in March. I want to say March 3rd, March 8th, early March
Third, I
on
believe it was. Yeah.
Disney Plus. And it looks like that's probably when I'm going to be resubscribing to Disney Plus. I've had that subscription on hiatus for a while because they increased the price yet again. And the only thing that was out
Mm,
was Skeleton Crew, and I'm hearing it's good, but it wasn't quite enough of a premise for me to be like, that's going to be worth my entire subscription. So with Skeleton Crew, a couple of other movies, and Daredevil Born Again, I feel like that'll be a good month to get back into Disney Plus. Also, March around here is
yeah.
just nothing but gray and rain and gross, and so it'll be a good time to get in there. I really like the trailer. I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with it. I was not expecting to see Matt Murdock and Kingpin sitting at a diner table talking to one
Oh,
another
right. Yeah.
openly about like, you're an evil criminal mastermind and now the mayor of New York. And by the way, he knows that I'm the vigilante. He knows that I'm Daredevil. I was like, okay, where is this going to go?
Yep.
And it wasn't until the last, I don't know, third of the trailer that they really start to show you what you're in for in terms of obviously he's not going to be not Daredevil for the whole thing. Hopefully that won't last much more than an episode, but
Yeah.
it looks like it's going to be just as violent and just as gritty as the Netflix series. So I'm on board. I like the idea of him taking a break and being forced back into it. I like the idea of Frank Castle coming back. Uh, they're approaching it as some time has passed, which I think is also
Hmm.
cool. Because some time has passed, like it's been several years since that Netflix series. Might give me a good excuse to rewatch it.
Yeah. I wonder if they're going to do it in real time as well, as though that, what, I don't know, it's been like 8 years or 7 years or something like that. Maybe I'm just imagining that it's been that long. It feels like it's been a long time since that show ended, but I'm curious to see how much time they'll actually have be between them. But yeah, in terms of characters they're bringing back, I'm actually really glad they brought back Deborah Ann Wall as Karen Page and Eldon Henson as Foggy Nelson, because those two, I feel like the show was good, but it was dark and gritty, and then those were like the two beacons of light. I know it sounds corny, but Matt Murdock was just, could have easily just spiraled and gone dark, 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 and those two were like the I feel like the heart of the show in terms of what his character needed. So I'm glad, and I think it's also because when I was hearing them talk about it originally, I don't think those two characters were going to be brought back, or at least they hadn't been added back into it yet. And so I was worried, so I'm happy they're back.
Yeah, Foggy is kind of like the heart or conscience for the viewer. And then I'm not sure what Karen would be. She's got like a sweetness and a justice side to her, but she went through some darker stuff herself in the second season, I want to say. Can't remember. It's been a while. It's been a
Yeah,
while. I think it was the second season.
I think you're right. It's a good idea to go back and watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're really good. They're 100% worth watching. Although I have to say, I don't like what's his name? Stick, the old man that taught
Oh
Daredevil all
yeah,
of his stuff. Can't stand the actor, can't stand the character. Just a giant irritation whenever he's on screen. Drives me crazy. Same with Elektra. Didn't like the Elektra character either. And I have no reference, so like I don't know if like, well, that's how both Stick and Elektra are in the comics. Well, then so be it. Then they're bad comic characters too, as far as I'm concerned. But I didn't enjoy them in the show. But
yeah.
yeah, the thing that I noticed a lot, and I watched it twice and still cringed when he broke the guy's knee. Like, brr.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was surprised the trailer was actually that violent.
Yeah, there's a lot of elbows and knees going the wrong way and
Yeah.
with sound effects. And I mean, I know it's all fake. I get it, but like it's that and the quick cut. So like it's not only do they show you it actually breaking in terms of a special effect, but then they cut away. And so then your brain then fills in the rest of like the pain and like the how it lands and all that kind of stuff. And I have
Yep.
unfortunately been privy to seeing that happen in real life. I watched live
Mm.
football when I was at university and one of the guys got injured and I saw it happen. And oh man, when you see a leg go the wrong way, nope. A capable, strong, large athlete go down like a sack of potatoes. You're like, oh no, that's just, you know how much pain that is, right?
Yeah.
Just gets you right in your core. It looks like it's going to be really, really good. And I mean, I'll have to say, D'Onofrio as Kingpin is one of my favorite villains in the last 10 years, easily. Well, this is going to be not nearly as gritty. We are going to talk about a documentary that Steven and I watched on Saturday evening on YouTube from the Gaming Historian YouTube channel. And it's called The Story of Super Mario Brothers 3. And I got randomly recommended this by the YouTube algorithm. And
Hmm.
I looked it over. I looked at it over Christmas. I didn't hit play. I just thought this seems like it's got enough views, and it feels like it has enough of a professional presentation. It's probably going to be good. And then I reached out to you and I said, "Hey, we should watch this for the new year for Citadel Cafe." And that snowballed into you should come over and we should just hang out
Yep.
and have a whiskey and watch this. And that's what we did.
We've been threatening to do that for so long.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And you live down the road.
Yeah, like a kilometer and a half away.
Yeah, it's like a mile for
A
Americans that are
mile.
like,
Yeah.
what did you just say? Yeah. It was very, very good. I
Yeah.
thought it was
Agreed.
well done. And especially because it's a documentary where I don't believe any real new footage was made for it. Not that I remember as anything being brand new looking. It felt like a lot of archival footage, a lot of news footage of like stores like Toys R Us from the 80s and footage from
Yeah.
Nintendo from the 80s, even the 70s. And I really thought it was well put together. I don't imagine that stuff was easy to come by. I don't know how you have to wrangle the rights for that kind of stuff, but
Yeah. Good
yeah,
point.
really, really cool to see it all put together. And there was a lot of interesting statistics that they went over,
Hmm.
which was both the best thing and sometimes the worst thing about the documentary, in that there are so many things that they threw at you that it does get a little dry at times in terms of like the narration and then just
Yeah.
the sheer volume of information that's coming at you. Names that you've never heard or only heard a couple times, combined with like sales numbers and all that kind of stuff. Uh, I think the only thing that I would have wanted more from the documentary would have been more behind the scenes art, more like trials of like,
Yeah.
this is what Mario used to look like, or this was the first draft of the Tanuki suit, or like this was, how it looked. We saw some stuff, but it was more like games that got released in Japan that never made it, and then how they refined it because it wouldn't sell to a North American audience, and no real concept art. But I guess that comes from you don't have access to Nintendo. You're just doing a YouTube documentary about the game and with the information and the footage that you can find and get access to. And if no one's ever filmed any kind of like concept art for Mario and Mario 3, then you're not going to have access to it. And that's
Right.
also my bias because I've got an art background and that kind of stuff. Just like it's really, really, really cool. It makes me wonder though if there is like an art of book, just like we, you and I have talked about art of books for games. I think you got the Arcane art book recently.
Yeah, that's nice.
I've got several art books over the years from Disney films. I think I still have my Atlantis book. I don't know whether that got borrowed or ruined or something, but I've got several from some very good um, movies. The Incredibles is a really good book, and I like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So seeing that for Super Mario Brothers 3 would have been cool. This is one of the few Nintendo Entertainment System games that I remember from being a kid. I remember getting it. I want to say it was a Christmas gift one year. I remember the wood paneling in my basement, when I would sit down there for hours and play it. Because I remember we had an old computer and my dad hooked it up so that we could use the monitor from the computer as like a TV set. Because that would be back when like they basically hooked up the same. And
Right.
so I would sit there and if I wasn't on the computer playing a game, I could switch it over and use the Nintendo and play it on the monitor, which I think to my parents' delight kept me off of any other television in the house while I
Yeah.
was playing the game. And I just remember really, really liking Super Mario 3. I never really enjoyed the Super Mario Brothers, the first one. It wasn't my jam. I played a bunch of other games. I was more like a Double Dragon guy, the beat 'em up games, and
Yep.
Mega Man. But then when Mario 3 came along, that's when I really kind of get into it. And just to talk about some of the stats that were in the documentary, Super Mario Brothers 3 was in development for over 2 years and cost over $800,000. And this is back in 1986, 87, when they were working on it. In 1988, the Nintendo Entertainment System sold 10 million consoles, so billions in revenue back in
Just
1988.
huge for that time.
Oh, massive. $25 million was spent on an ad campaign for Super Mario Brothers 3 in 1989. And you and I remember this ad. Like they played this ad in the documentary. And it's a bunch of people
Yeah.
in different colored shirts all chanting Mario, Mario. And then when they pull out, there's a giant Mario face on the planet. Like it's a pretty decent special effect for 1989.
And I'd completely forgotten about it, but as soon as it started to happen again, my brain just, you know, reached down into the depths of your long-term memory and was just, oh my goodness, it's happening. It came back as soon as I saw what they were doing. It was pretty cool.
I'm not sure when they ran it. I feel like it was probably either Saturday morning cartoons or like those blocks of shows like Family Matters and Full House and that kind of stuff. I feel like that's
Mm.
when, because if they're spending that kind of money on it, it must have been a primetime ad or maybe even Super Bowl. Not that I was watching the Super Bowl when I was 10. But in 1989, when the game came out, 2.7 billion in gross sales for Nintendo worldwide. And I did a little research, just found a site online. 2.7 billion adjusted for inflation is 6.8 billion today.
Jeez.
In 1989, there were 140,000 calls per week to the Nintendo Power hotline. How do I beat this level? What? How do we do this? I had a Nintendo Power magazine subscription, 100%, and they put out their first player guide, I think ever,
Right.
for Super Mario Brothers 3, and I had it. I don't think I still have it. I'm sure it's been recycled somewhere, but I remember when they started showing images from that Nintendo Power issue with the Mario 3 guide. I remember seeing that because it was the combination of like seeing the levels all like unfolded so you can kind of look down ahead and know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And they had little write-ups on how to fight like the Hammer Brothers or the Koopas or the different bad guys that were in Super Mario 3. And instead of the sprites in the magazine, they had cartoon drawings. And as a young cartoonist, like I ate it all up because it was like you finally get to see what these things look like when they're not pixels on screen, because the NES was only an 8-bit system. So they were limited with what they could do with Super Mario Brothers 3. And I remember that Nintendo Power magazine. Did you have one as a kid?
No, my younger brother had a subscription to them, so every cover that they showed in the documentary, we had it as well. And as soon as they showed the player's guide, I went, "Yep, remember that 100%." It's just so it's funny. So many things that I had forgotten. I actually forgot a lot about the Super Mario 3 game until they started showing the gameplay of it again, and it was I don't know, such a nice experience to have revisit your childhood. So
Yeah. Well, I think that they mentioned that the game was the first 2-player with Mario. Like you could, because they had the world map, it was the first world map that they introduced into the series. And you would play as Mario, and instead of playing until you died, I think you played until you beat the level, or you took a turn.
yeah,
And if you died, the other person got a turn, or if you beat the level, the other person still got a turn, and they can go and play the next one. And I remember playing with Scott Clark. Scott Clark and I would sit down. I remember being in his room because the TV was like up on a dresser, and we would sit on the floor. So I remember looking up at this TV and just trying to decide in the mini map like which level we were going to try to fight next, and who was going to have to fight the Hammer Brothers if they came in the path.
right.
I have definite memories of like dealing with the different things in that game, because it was not like the other Mario games that just went level to level to level. You just kind of, everything was in the game. There was no top-down view of what you could do next.
In the gameplay, do you recall whether or not if I beat a level, for example, and then it was your turn, did you have to beat the same level again, or was that level considered beaten, and then you could go on to the one afterwards?
No, if it was 2-player, you would go on to the one afterwards, as far as I can recall.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't make any sense for you to then have to beat the same level that I just beat. Because I think the way that it worked was there'd be 2 paths. The castle would be on one side and you'd be on the other. And let's say there's like, you can go left or you can go right. And depending on whether you wanted to fight the Hammer Brothers or not, you would go left or right. And when you beat the level, you could then move to the next level, and that would clear that node. And so Luigi coming up behind me, if I was Mario, could go to the node next down the line, or could go left instead of right, and we could kind of clear both paths. Like just kind of see who could get there first, or like who had the easier path or whatever.
So it was collaborative, competitive.
Yeah, I think the competition came with like whatever your score was at the end of the level, right? Because there was a star thing you had to hit at the end. There was coins, of course, you collect because it's a Mario game. And there was also mini games on the map too. Like there was basically slot machines that you could pull. There was a memory game. There was different cards that you could turn over, and if you matched them, then you got like a power up or a 1-up or a star or a bunch of other stuff. Like it was really really interesting that they gave you some things to do in the mini map, as opposed to just kind of sit there and wait. Lord Valor in the live chat is saying that in 1989, the Super Bowl was against the Cincinnati Bengals and San Francisco 49ers, and the ad was played on January 22nd. No kidding. That's hilarious. Moving on into 1990, which I believe is just like the year after the game came out, because I think it was released technically in 89 for Christmas, but then 1990 would have been the full year with Super Mario Brothers 3 on shelves. And I don't think this is just the game. I think this is Nintendo wide, but 3.4 billion in revenue, up from 2.7, and that adjusts to 8.6 billion in adjusted for inflation to today in a year, which is wild. And in 1993, Super Mario Brothers 3 was the best-selling standalone video game ever at the time. That was, I think, surpassed by Tetris, and then later surpassed by Minecraft, is the current world leader in most successful or most best-selling standalone video game. But in 93, it was Super Mario Brothers 3, which explains why I was so into it. Like, it explains why so many of my friends were talking about it in like the late 80s, early 90s.
It was such a cool upgrade to the original one.
Totally. And this is something that you and I were actually discussing while watching the Mario 3 documentary, because we didn't watch these in order. The Mario 3 documentary was the one that I thought, it's the one that I remembered, so that's what we watched. But during it, they were showing some footage from Doki Doki Panic, which looked really familiar to us, but then also, I've never seen this game before. Why does it look so familiar? And we realized that what they did was there was actually two versions of Super Mario Brothers 2. And
Yep.
in Japan, the second version of Super Mario Brothers was it looked just like the first one, but it was harder. And in North America, their North American sales rep or president or whatever his role was said, this is not going to fly. It's not fun. It's too hard. American kids are not going to want to play it. And what they did was they replaced all the different characters in Doki Doki Panic with Mario, Toad, Princess Peach, Koopa, and then all the bad guys. And that explains to me why Super Mario Brothers 2, the one that I grew up with, was so weird, because it was weird. Like it was a departure from what I felt. If you put Mario Brothers or Super Mario Brothers and you put Super Mario Brothers 3, like, yeah, it's an upgrade. It's an immense upgrade. It looks very, very different, but they still feel like they're part of the same franchise. The second one it fits because it's got Mario in it and Luigi, but it's so odd. And this explains why, because it was originally a completely different game.
Yeah. I mean, they made it fit by having, like, once you beat the game, it showed Mario was sleeping and he wakes up. So it was almost like this was some weird dream sequence that he was experiencing. And I'm sure they had to put that in as an afterthought to say, well, how can we justify having this game? Like you said, how can we justify having this game look so different? But yeah, we were confused multiple times through the documentary, like Super Mario 2, and it took them a while to actually, before they showed Doki Doki Panic. So I wasn't sure. I felt like I was missing something.
I agree. I feel like they should have led with that. I think they should have mentioned at the start of the conversation about Super Mario Brothers 2, like the next sentence should have been like, this was released in Japan and it was really hard and it was very similar to the first one. But in America, what Americans saw was this. And then kind of go back and like explain how that happened. And then you'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I only caught on because I'm aware of the releases in history, and a lot of things ended up coming out in Japan first and then to us later. And so when you look at that time period, especially around the 80s, if you see something that feels like, oh, this feels weird, and it's because like the cartoon version or the whatever version that was released originally in Japan, when it came to America and ultimately Canadian TV shows, it was different and it was later. So if it says like, oh, this was released in 89, I was like, was it released in 89? Like, I'm pretty sure that I was like 11 or 12 and living in the second house that I remember as a kid. And it was right, because I probably didn't get my hands on it until 1990 or 1991, right? So it just depends on, when they say it was released in 1989, they weren't specific about Japan, or, they didn't follow up with like, and then 2 years later in America. Like, so there's a couple things like that where it did come out in the documentary when it was released and where, but it wasn't kind of like a list of timelines and release dates up front. It would be like 10 minutes later before they would get to it. So you kind of had to be there for the longer conversation, which is fine. I think a lot of times the way that information is organized in more modern documentaries is a little bit different. Something I did appreciate, though, is that this is a straight up documentary. It is not, there's no manufactured drama. They're not interviewing creators and then editing the interviews to make them sound like they're at each other's throats. Or we've had some crappy documentaries lately that have been pulling on nostalgia strings in the last few years, but then ultimately they're not the best. I think The Toys That Made Us is the most egregious series that I've seen. It started off good, but then it went down a rabbit hole quickly. So I'm glad that it was more of a straight up documentary. I also thought it was really cool to hear about the presentation style and the systems that were introduced into the game compared to previous titles. I did not catch on to this until they mentioned it in the documentary. And then it made complete sense because I was 10 at the time. But the theatrical presentation, everything in Super Mario 3 is made to look like it's on a stage, like on a play stage. There's a curtain, or like a curtain call. All the backdrop stuff, some of the platforms that you stand on look like they're bolted to the stage or the background. And a lot of stuff, because of just the flat nature of pixel art, looks like cardboard cutouts. It looks like set dressing and props that you would see in a stage, and a low budget one at
Yeah.
that. So that was really, really cool. And I never picked up on that before. We've already mentioned the first overworld map with mini games and power-ups. There was also the raccoon, frog, hammer, and tanuki suits, and those are all brand new. You could fly with the raccoon suit. You could wiggle your tail and fly. The frog suit made you slow on land but fast in water. The hammer suit let you throw hammers just like the Hammer Brothers. And the tanuki suit was very similar to the raccoon suit, but you could turn into a statue. I remember the name tanuki, but I thought that referred to the raccoon suit. I didn't remember the tanuki suit at all. And it's a Japanese folklore reference, the little raccoon tanuki suit that you can turn into a statue, I guess. But I don't remember using that one very often. It looks cooler than the raccoon ability, because the raccoon ability, when you got a leaf, basically gave Mario ears and a tail. But the tanuki suit was like a onesie. His face was showing, and it had ears and a tail, but like it was a complete outfit, like the frog suit.
Felt more like the equivalent of the hammer suit and the frog suit.
There was also Koopaling bosses, so mini bosses throughout the game that you'd have to fight. And they were all named after like musicians or composers or something. Like there was one that was named after Iggy Pop. Another one was Ludwig von Beethoven. And there's others, but you can really see it when they explain it in the documentary. You're like, oh yeah, I can totally see that like 80s pop star being an influence on the name of this particular character. So that was really cool to see too.
Pretty neat that a lot of there's also a mention that a lot of the characters in the game were based on the game designers and the people who worked on it, just as like a little thank you and a nod to the people who put in such hard work. And it was even funny, the ghost creatures that would look away when you're not looking, but then chase after you when you're looking away. It was based off of one of the, I forget which one of the designers, but based on one of their wives who was extremely, extremely shy, but then also could get quite angry when they worked overtime. So there was a character based on that. And there's a couple of other ones that were based on people that they knew, which I thought was a cool little way to say thank you, or to just sort of be inspired by people you know.
I imagine there's all kinds of little Easter eggs like that in those games, especially when you're like the trailblazing
Oh my goodness, yeah.
programmers and developers at Nintendo back in the 80s, before everything went just so big, right? And a lot of those people, I mean, the documentary was what, 7 years old, something like that, 5 years ago. At the time, at least at the time they were writing it, a lot of these people were still working at Nintendo. Like they're still the lead composer, they're still the level designer, or they're on like international development for Switch, or they're in a role at Nintendo doing something cool. And what I find so interesting, I mean, granted they are kind of PR photos, but when they show the person now, they're beaming. Like it looks like they've had a joyful career. Like they do not look stressed out in the least. I'm sure there were moments in video game development that were very stressful, a lot of overtime. I'm sure there was a lot of that. But ultimately, I really feel like these guys, because I don't think there's one woman mentioned, but I don't remember her name. And she was only in it briefly before somebody else took over. I think she was the musician or sound design.
Yes.
And the rest of them are all men. But they all just look like they have something really, really like something to be very proud of, in terms of their careers at Nintendo. It was really cool.
And I think the fact that they're all still there says a lot as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally.
I mean, overall, I really enjoyed the documentary. I forgot about the I guess the order in which they gave information about Super Mario 2 versus the Super Mario 2 American release. That made it a bit confusing. So until you mentioned that, my only real complaint about the series or the documentary was just I found the delivery by the narrator a little bit unenthusiastic at points, just like as though he was almost reading off a card.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it was bad, but it felt like it was the same all the way through. So it was, but I mean, I appreciate the work and the research and everything that went into it. It was, his voice is a little bit annoying, but it's not enough to keep me away from looking at more of those documentaries. I thought it was pretty cool.
I would say the same criticism from me. I think the other thing that hamstrings the narrator is also the fact that he was reading off statistics like 2.7 billion in gross, 3.4 billion in gross, 140K calls at Nintendo Power Magazine hotline. Like there's not a lot of flavor to that information. Like there's no inside stories about fun stuff, except for, like you said, like those little teeny tidbits about like the ghost being modeled after some guy's wife. And
Yeah.
that's a funny moment, but that bit of information could have been delivered with a smile or some sort of inflection or something. And it wasn't. It was like an evening news read. Like it was just the same, which was cool to have the information. But again, like you said, it's just a little on the dry side. And I mean, that brings up that there are others on Gaming Historian on YouTube. There is a Super Mario World documentary. That's the one I'm really looking forward to watching. Super Mario Kart, which I know you are a big fan of, as am I.
Yeah.
And there is one for Super Mario Brothers 2. So you could get the full story rather than the Cole's notes
Yeah.
in Mario Brothers 3. You can get the full story about like how Super Mario Brothers 2 came to be. I would imagine a lot of it has to do with the first development parts in Japan, but then how it got tweaked and changed and brought over to North America. But yeah, there's a couple of other documentaries on the channel that I have bookmarked and will definitely be returning to. The thing that I am curious about is like I said, the Super Mario World documentary, because that would also be the first title on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System when they go to 16-bit color. And I've been watching some coding documentaries, not coding documentaries, I guess they're tutorials on somebody that is currently trying to make Super Mario World in Godot, which is a video game engine for PC. And because the controls and the way that Mario moves in Super Mario World has been kind of world renowned as like some of the best platformer controls, especially for the time, but really have stood the test of time. This guy decided to try to recreate this in Godot to teach himself, like, okay, well, how do Mario physics really work? Like, what's the actual code happening here? And how, he's doing it in Godot on modern computers, but like, how difficult would this have been back in like the 90s when they were making Super Mario World? And it's just really made me nostalgic for that game. And I played it, I don't want to say recently, it was a couple years ago when my niece got a Switch for Christmas. And once my sister and her husband realized that you could download like NES games and Super NES games on the Switch and play them, they were like, well, this is what we're doing when she goes to bed. Like they play the new game, like the new Mario Kart was like a family event thing for them. But then as soon as Kaylee would go to bed, Andrea and Nick would be just like, let's load up Super Mario World and play this. Like this has been years since we've looked at this. And I remember playing it with them one evening. And like the nostalgia and like I remember the moves. Like I remember how to do everything. Like this is wild. Like how much time did I spend in my youth on this game? So I'm really looking forward to the Super Mario World documentary on Gaming Historian. Speaking of playing games, we did load up a game after we were watching the documentary. I've been playing Nine Souls from Red Candle Games. It was released in May of 2024. Currently retails for $38.99 Canadian on Steam, and it is a Metroidvania with a bit of a twist. To quote the website, a journey of Asian fantasy inspired by Sekiro, Hollow Knight, and Katana Zero. Nine Souls is a lore-rich, hand-drawn 2D action platformer featuring intense, deflection-focused combat, immersive storytelling, and a unique Tau punk setting. I didn't research any of this before I started playing it because it's available on Game Pass on Xbox. I liked the cover art. I looked at a couple of stills and watched like a couple seconds of the trailer. I ended up pausing the trailer because I think it was like too loud. Like I had my TV too loud. Video game trailers on Xbox Game Pass are like watching advertisements on YouTube. I haven't seen advertisements on YouTube in a long time because I've got premium, but they were always 10 times louder than the show that you're watching. So I don't really tend to watch the trailers, or if I do, I'm scrambling for the mute button. But I watched enough of it to be just like, this looks really, really cool. And the first bit of the trailer is very like Asian fantasy. Like there's nothing in it suggests sci-fi. So I played the first hour of the game, and after saving my little pal Sean, who was the human that rescued me from a wall of a cave, I find out that there's human sacrifice. There's this tribal village that are sacrificing members of their village at this like techno shrine. And when I save Sean from being sacrificed, both of us go down into the bowels of this shrine and realize that it's like this giant underground, technologically advanced facility that is making evil robots out of the parts from the people that are being sacrificed. So they're like part ape-man, part machine. Like, it is wild. Not for kids, pretty violent. Not in like a grotesque way, but if there's a sword play, and when you beat an enemy, you tend to chop them into pieces. So there's a little bit of blood, and it's not. I don't know if I don't remember a lot of blood. There's a lot of like flashy sword moves, but when things fall apart, they make like squishy, gross noises. So there's definitely like organic bits in these metal samurais that are attacking you. And I was pleasantly surprised by the sci-fi twist. Like, I did not see that coming. Like I said, I didn't watch the whole trailer. I didn't read up about the game. I knew nothing about it. It just kind of fell in my lap as a recommended title on Game Pass. And while there's a lot of reading, it's really cool. It's a really deep world. You have a jade system, which is like your cybernetic implants that you are upgrading as you play along. You have abilities that you unlock as you get more points to spend at, I can't remember what they're called, Steven. Is it Lotus points or something? They're basically like metal flowers that you can like save the game at, improve your character, spend your currency, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I forget the name of them.
Yeah, they're the pink flowers on the map. I know
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and there's also there's another system as well. There's the deflection focused combat is the other thing. And I really like, unlike some of the other games that I've been playing lately, I really like that Nine Souls was not afraid to just like pop up an image of like the right trigger or the left stick or the X button on the screen and say, press this now. Like, this is what you need to press this button now. You've just learned a new ability. Press the left trigger to stomp on an enemy's head when they're doing a red unparryable attack. So like, you can parry attacks in this, but if an enemy is a red enemy and they are charging up red, which is like they have like red lightning that kind of circles around them, you know that you're screwed. And for that, you have to like jump up in the air and then basically stomp on their head. And that gives them like not a knockout, but they kind of get dizzy, and then you can attack them and do whatever you want. And I just like that the game said like, you have to do this. And you were here with me when we went into this weird kind of like ethereal realm. They don't do a great job of explaining what all this stuff is. So there's a lot of like thick world building lore that they do not hold your hand through. But during that process, I was fighting something or someone, and I was learning that mechanic. And this person was saying, when you run into these enemies, like, make sure that you use I can't remember what it was called, like the Tau dodge or the Tau release or whatever it is, to disarm and disorient them. And you had to do it 3 times. Like, so you had to complete the task, not just once, but you had to do it 3 times. So you learned it before he would finish the conversation and you could leave the cutscene. Brilliant way to onboard players into a game as complicated as this. But there's also other stuff that's really simple. When you walk up to a door or a platform that you need to hack, it says press B to hack, or press Y to talk to this person. Like, really simple stuff, and not afraid to just put a symbol up on screen for the player. But it's not immersion breaking. Like, it's fine. I know I'm playing a video game, and I really like that. I prefer that to explaining things in a paragraph and expecting me to remember it like 20 minutes later.
I think the game itself sort of allowed for that because you play sort of a cyborg or cybernetic being. So having those little prompts, I didn't think of it at the time, but just listening to you talk about it again, it sort of fits. It didn't feel out of place because of all of the technology and the the Tau punk, as they call it, which, by the way, beautiful.
Oh my
Love
gosh,
that aesthetic.
So cool.
Good. But it just the nature of it being a technology based game, it didn't feel out of place for me when it was happening. But I mean, I gotta say, I really appreciate you introducing me to this game because I hadn't even heard of it until you mentioned it, and it's beautiful. The colors are really bright, but not so bright that they hurt your eyes, and the movement is really smooth. There was I didn't notice any choppiness whatsoever, and it's just the reality of it. It looked stunning on your 4K TV. It was a really, it makes me want to go buy it.
Yeah, there's a lot of hand-drawn animation too. You play as Yi, a long-forgotten hero of the past, reawakened from a stasis by the human child Shan Shan, who is my little buddy in the game, and you are like an anthropomorphic cat, so to speak. Like, it just, they don't really explain why you're a cat. I've not run into, outside of the person that showed me how to stomp on other people's heads, who was like an adult cat, like a large human cat. I've not seen anybody else with my species, but we're already talking about like space travel and cosmos and gods, and like there's all kinds of wild stuff. It's very Asgard. So it has that thing where like technically Thor's an alien, but a god at the same time. There's technology, but it's supposed to be spirit. Like there's this weird mix, right? And that's what it feels like. It feels like there's all this spirituality and like very calm, meditative stuff that's happening with the powers that I have. But then it's also very clear that it's a cybernetic jade system, you know, that it's a system, and that I'm talking with an AI with my earpiece. Like I can communicate via wireless, you know, conversation with this computer essentially, and like that kind of stuff is mixed in with like the souls, the 9 souls that manage this world that you're in, are essentially referred to as gods. But like, are they gods? Are they creatures? Like, we don't know yet, and you don't really, I haven't really seen anything farther. So until I fight the first one, then I'll know what I'm dealing with. But yeah, it's kind of like this age old situation of the technology is so advanced that these tribal humans just think of it as like deity and magic, right?
Yeah.
And they've been brainwashed to think that they're ascending to a higher plane to live with the gods, when they're basically just being like turned into paste. So you have a soft spot for Shan Shan, even though he annoys the crap out of you. Yi is a warrior of few words. Sean can go on this long rant, and you'll have like a 3-word answer. You're very stoic,
or a dramatic sigh.
Yeah, or you just stare at him. It's funny in a way, but you're fed up with these gods, and apparently you have a history with them too. Like this, the first of these souls is communicating with you, because when you and I were playing, and encountered the first mini boss, this soul, this boss was on the digital communicator with us, saying like, "It can't be you. But it has to be you. Only you can move that fast." Like, it just, the disbelief of like, we thought you were dead and now you're back, sort of stuff, is definitely thick in the dialogue. And I like the encounters. I don't know if you had a chance to play the boss. I think I was the one fighting it. It was difficult, but it was not impossible. Like, it took me 3 or 4 tries, but it wasn't 9 or 10. You know what I mean?
That's where it was neat, because the training session that they gave you off to the side was almost, well, not almost, it was very much specifically to prepare you to fight this person. And then it ended up being a combo of a parry, which I hadn't even seen before. And then you throw the parry in one attack and then do the head stomp on another one. And it was, if I remember correctly anyway, but either way, it was one of those things that the first time you fight them, they're going to hand your butt to you.
Yes.
There was no way around it. But then I think it was your 4th time. It was like your 3rd or 4th time. It was, oh, I got this now. And then it took me a couple times after that. But it was more of a fair fight once you realize the mechanics of it. It was pretty neat.
I think the biggest misnomer, or the thing that you don't really grasp as a player, especially for someone that doesn't play these kinds of games that often, is that you are so small. Like, you're just a little kitty. And this guy had a spear that was 10 times as big as I was. Never mind how big he was. And when you do the parry, you just kind of think, well, I can't just stand here and parry. This guy is going to skewer me like a kebab. But the parry actually works and doesn't do any damage. You might get pushed back a little bit, but you actually don't take any damage. And once you realize like, oh, this parry applies to like everybody, not just like the
Yeah.
regular enemies that you see on like throughout the levels, because they're pretty straightforward. Like the dude with the sword and the dude with the crossbow, those are the two basics, and they're really easy to handle. Even when you first encounter them, you might get tagged once, but after that, you're like, nah, I got this. These guys are dumber than a bag of hammers, in a good way, because it kind of gets your confidence up. It gets you pressing buttons and trying new combos and stuff. And yeah, it was difficult to try to figure out not just like the parry, but when you do have to get out of the way, how quickly do you need to get out of the way? Because like the reach on some of these guys is just
Mm.
ridiculous. And so that was really interesting to figure out. But once you got the parry down and you knew the pattern, which I have to hand it to the designers, the pattern is not bog simple. Like there's definitely a few different moves that he would go through before he would get to his his red lightning move. And it was really, really fun. And again, I I wasn't paying a close attention as I could have been if someone else was playing, but he was a very cool looking boss too. Like really
He
beautiful
was. Yeah.
design, and everything's hand drawn, but it's moved like kind of like puppets. The bad guys are anyway. The main character, is all hand drawn animation. There's no cell shading or cutouts happening. But some of the bad guys, because of how numerous they are or how large they are, and how complicated their armor looks, they have them like in segments. They're kind of being moved around with like a spine, but they're still very, very cool. I like the cartooniness of it. I like the animations, the weight. The You mentioned the background design and the Tau punk aesthetic. They're using complementary colors or close complementary colors, which is very cool. So a lot of the time that I've spent in the game, the backgrounds have been like a teal green, like a jade, and then your cloak, like your kimono thing, is like an orangey yellow. So it's like blue and orange. Like they're twisted around the color wheel a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting. But they're definitely playing with like you are a contrasting color to the background, so you're very easy to spot. And then the bad guys also have some yellow in them, but there's a lot of red on them. So they you immediately look at them and go like bad. Like this guy's got red lightning shooting around him. I probably don't want to touch him. Like there's stuff like that. I think the only time that I was confused with the colors and the layout was the difference between something you're supposed to jump on and something you're supposed to use your grappling hook for.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's not technically a grappling hook. It's like a bit of light energy that comes out of your chest, but it's used like a grappling hook. But they're both circular or disc shaped and very similar. They are different once you see them next to each other, but if you haven't seen them next to each other, I kept on jumping into pits and dying because I was like, I'm trying to use my grapple hook on this thing and it just won't let me. And it turns out that I'm supposed to jump on it. And I must have missed that prompt somewhere. But once we figured it out, it worked out pretty well.
One of the things that impressed me about the backgrounds as well is they do this. They've got multiple levels of parallax going on. So you've got the immediate background going one speed, and then the one behind it slower, and then one in the far background going even slower. But what took me a little while to realize is beyond parallax, it actually had 3D modeling and perspective in there as well. So you could actually, a lot of, I guess maybe it's just because of the newness of the game, but a lot of the older ones, they would just have flat backgrounds that would all go at different speeds to sort of imply depth. But this one actually had really great perspective changing on the backgrounds and the objects as well as you walk by them. So really enjoyed that as well.
I'd like to see a behind the scenes on how they made it. I wouldn't be surprised if the flat levels that we're playing on are actually projected on a pixel plane in a 3D environment, so that
Mm.
when you're moving, they can do stuff with 3D in the background that just makes the world feel immersive, but doesn't affect your 2D gameplay, you know? And I prefer a 2D platformer to a 3D platformer. I find 3D platformers, I just end up spinning the camera
Oh yeah, yeah.
and it's not the most fun. It's not, I find I like the precision of a 2D platformer over trying to run in a straight line and collect 5 coins in a row. I'm going to miss one of them
Yeah.
in a 3D platformer. So I prefer the 2D ones. And I think the thing there is that a lot of times, as far as my experience has been, the 2D platforms tend to be more lush. They tend to look like there's more time to put into the artwork than there is, because when stuff is CG, like you can only put so much energy and texture into it before it starts to get really cluttered. Whereas with the 2D platformers like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, I think is one of my favorite. Or is that the
Hmm.
second one? Anyway, I've only played the first one. I haven't played the second one, and it's beautiful. I have it installed. Next time you're over, I'll show you, and it's very, very fun. Similar vibe, but you play like a little woodland sprite, and you're going through like roots and overgrowth and stuff, and you're fighting like insects and bugs and fireflies and things like that as you're trying to restore life and light to the forest. I think it's a really sweet story.
I think you told me about that one before, and I looked it up, and it just, for whatever reason, fell off my radar. But I remember that being a really pretty looking game too.
Oh, very, very pretty. And again, like it's like a dark, deep blue, navy, black background, and then you're basically like a little white glowing sprite. Like it's very vibrant and has like that, not Tron look, but it has like that glowing character on top of a very dark background vibe.
Nice.
Something I do like about Nine Souls is that it is not a roguelike. That is what I believe Have a Nice Death is a roguelike. And I want to say Hollow Knight is also a roguelike. I haven't spent enough time with Hollow Knight to really feel that, but I did try Have a Nice Death, and it's beautifully animated and really fun, very snappy and hilarious. But I don't like roguelikes. I don't like going back and doing the same thing over again. I don't like levels that are designed for me not to win the first time. Not because I suck, but because I'm just not meant to. It feels bad to
Right.
me. It's not my favorite thing. I like save points, and that's what you get in Nine Souls. You get save points. So whenever you go to one of your Lotus points that we mentioned earlier, and you basically save, or you can rest, you can recharge. Like it really gives you options, and I feel like it's fun because if you don't do it right, if you need to go back to that boss a couple of times and try to different strategies, you're not spending the next 20 minutes going through the entire level that's been repopulated with enemies again. And then you get not lazy, but like nothing bothers me more in a roguelike platformer where you're about to go into the boss, but you happen to like screw up a little bit, and then you get hit a couple times by an enemy just before you get to the boss, and now you're at half health. It's like, well, like I just got here. Like I know how to fight the boss, but I can't do it with half health. Like that kind of stuff I find tedious. And so I prefer something like this as opposed to a roguelike. I know that it's available for Switch. It's available on Steam, obviously on Xbox. Are you tempted at all to pick up Nine Souls?
I am. I've got to build up my allowance a little bit, and I'm hoping I can buy it in the next month or so. But it's I've not really. I have a hard time justifying buying video games just with things I need to buy and household expenses and stuff like that. But it's just it was nice to listen to you talk about all the things you liked in it, because I only had a chance to play it for that very brief time, and I was also not familiar with the Xbox controller a ton, so I was focused on like the feel as well as the buttons, as well as the attacks and things like that. So I don't feel like I got to appreciate it in the way that you were able to talk about all of that stuff. But it was, man, it was such a fun game to play, and I know I've said it a few times already, but it's pretty. It's just such a nice, even when you're not fighting anyone, it just the Tau punk aesthetic again. Just as you're going through, it's just the game design is just top notch. So it's up there on my list of ones to buy. There's another one that I don't know much about it, but there was a game called Gree that was very very calm, almost water color like graphics, and then the creators of that made a second one as well, and I forget the name right now. But those two are around the same price, around the $35 to $40 mark, and I'm on the fence as to which one I'm going to get first. But I appreciate you introducing me to it because it was a treat.
I think you're right. I think the art and the aesthetic is part of the hook. Like it's part of the reason why it stands out as, I mean, one of the very numerous Metroidvania type games that are out there. I think that it stands out in terms of like the themes, the colors, and I mean the story is unique compared to the other ones, but the gameplay I wouldn't necessarily say is all that unique. Like they all have similar kind of vibes to them, but
Yeah.
the story and the overall art direction I think really make it stand out compared to others. Moving on to the Internet Minute, which is brought to you by you, dear listener. The Citadel Cafe is 100% listener supported. If you get value out of the show, please consider putting a little bit of value back in. You can become a member at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Joining at any level will get you an invite to the member-only Discord server, as well as access to the Barista Cut bonus audio sessions when we extend the podcast and record some extra audio. The special thanks this week go to Cosmic and Smurf588. Thank you ever so much for your support of this episode. Patron count is at 23, which is steady on from the holiday roundtable before the Christmas break. Our goal each time we sit down is to have one more patron. If you would like to be patron number 24, visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. I'm kicking off the year with Lego. How can you not? Especially when the Lego set in question, speaking of nostalgia actually this week, is the Lego Blacktron Renegade, which is a nostalgic tribute to a beloved 1980s Blacktron Future Generation series, and it's based on the original. It is set 10355, 129.99 Canadian, 1151 pieces, 4 inches tall, 12 inches wide, and 19 inches long. It's a spaceship, so it's like low, but like wide and long. And it's really cool looking. It's a really cool looking retro set. And what I like about this is that when you go and you look at the actual Blacktron series from the 80s, this looks like that, but it feels tighter. It has probably better structure, better design. Pieces are more efficient. The canopies are cleaner looking, probably custom. So it has the kind of build quality that you would expect from a modern set, which I think is really smart, but nods to the retro set. And I think that one of the things that I've noticed when I've either seen retro sets, like old sets built on YouTube, or even just found my own sets around, is that they don't feel as good as modern sets because, of course, the technology and the piece variety wasn't there. And so I think they've done a really good job. And I'm just looking at this, from a video standpoint, just looking at the images and stuff. I don't really remember the Blacktron Future Generation series specifically from my youth. I remember the color scheme. I remember the black and the neon yellow, but I don't remember having any. And when I went looking for like what sets were out in the 80s from Space Lego, I found a video from Beyond the Brick called Every Classic Lego Space Set Ever Made. And it's a video at a convention. And this guy has all of them. There's 74 sets in the 80s for the Lego Classic Space sets. And as he travels through them, it's like, I remember seeing that one around. And I was like, I know I had one. And I just did another quick Google search while this video was playing. And I found the one that I had, or at least the one that I remember. And I probably still have this in a bag somewhere. It's set 6780, the Light and Sound XT Starship. I remember it. I remember holding it. As soon as I saw the box, it's like, oh yes, I remember the lights. I remember the blinking lights. I remember trying to build it in different configurations, but still use the lights. I remember how some of the little laser cannons would always fall off. It just drove me crazy. A lot of these space sets have these pointy bits on them, and they tend to bump. They snap off it if you're using it as a play set, like if you're playing with it as a kid. If it's on a shelf somewhere, they're fine. But I really liked the Space Lego when I was a kid. They had these translucent pieces that were like red plastic, green plastic, and I guess yellow as well. And they really were fun lasers or like sci-fi stuff. I used to put the laser pointy bits in the hands of my Lego minifigures as if they were lightsabers, because there was no Star Wars Lego. The license didn't exist back in the 80s. So that stuff was really, really cool. And this Lego Blacktron set is worth a look. If you remember those sets, if you had one, or you're just looking for some cool retro space Lego, it's a very, very cool set and not priced unreasonably. Like I feel like they could have gone a lot higher with this and pulled on the nostalgia chain for a lot of people, but not bad, for $130. It's a big set. It's not a lot of pieces, but like a foot by a foot and a half, like that is not small. That's a good luck putting that somewhere, I'll have to say, I was just talking with Chad before the show, and he shared an Instagram post where somebody had taken all of their Star Wars ships and mounted them vertically on the wall with like little frames around them.
Oh, wow.
And you could totally do that with this. It's only 4 inches tall, so it's not going to stick off the wall that far. But if you could find a way to like use picture frame hooks or even custom Lego or something that you could stick this to the wall. I mean, you'd want to do it securely, because if it ever fell off the wall, that would be catastrophic. To have this in like a frame with like a yellow LED light around the frame would be super cool. It would be really, really slick.
Make me want to spend all my money because this I had this set. There's
Did you
if
really?
you scroll down on that if you scroll down on the webpage, there's actually a side-by-side video that says "Return to the '80s." Because when I first saw this, I said, "Oh man, I used to have a few sets that were this orange and black space. It's so cool, and this looks kind of familiar." And partway down the page, it shows the person putting together the original one, and I went, "Yeah, that's the shape of it." And then clipping pieces together, I'm going, "Oh my goodness, this is." I had the exact same one, so to see this upgraded version of the same thing, so now this is competing with me wanting to spend money on the video games. Now this is so cool. I had this exact one. Well, the original version of this exact one.
When you see it in the video with the dude holding it, like it's a large piece of kit.
Much bigger than the original.
Yeah, really, really cool. So what's your pick this week, my friend?
Mine is a TikTok artist, actually. He's an animator from Costa Rica. His username is Dave.xp on TikTok, and he does really cool 8-bit animation. They're really, really short and they loop, but he's got ones what's his name? The Falcon and Captain America. So when Steve Rogers is running by, saying on your left, on your left, on your left, he's got an 8-bit version of that, and it just loops and loops and loops and does the same thing over and over again. There's another one of Superman flying through the air, and the background is just, as blurred as you can get with 8-bit, but these colors zooming by, and it's just, that one's just really slick. The Captain America one that made me laugh, but then they've got other ones from like Dumb and Dumber, the Charlie Brown Christmas dance party one where they're all dancing around. It's just, it's so good. I mean, it's 8-bit, so it still looks like it's, right out of the 80s or something like that. But the it's almost like done 8-bit, but with 2025 sort of artistic sensibility. Or sensitivity. It's really well done. Good colors, and they would have had a higher, a larger palette of colors these days than you would have had back in the day as well. So the gradients and things that go along with this, with the 8-bit aesthetic, it's really sharp stuff and good choice of colors, and some of them are quite funny, and other ones it's just almost like it pulls on your nostalgia heartstrings.
These are super fun. I'm watching a couple of them silently now in the background, and yeah, they are great. There's like Roman Trojan horse stuff, Dumb and Dumber, some Dragon Ball Z, a lot of pop culture references. And the 8-bit just refers to the resolution of the characters so much. Like the colors are still very like true and vibrant. And I'm wondering, have they ever mentioned anything about like how they do it, or is it just the videos? You don't know. There's no like voiceover. Yeah, because Sprite is something that I've seen a lot because I've been doing a lot of just game dev research and watching a lot of like other documentaries and stuff beyond the one that we watched on the weekend. And currently, Sprite seems to be the king for pixel sprites for video games, pixel animation, just pixel art in general. Not that you can't do it in Photoshop, but Sprite is basically built to do one thing, which is pixel art. And so it's very good at it. And it's very lightweight. So a lot of people can run it on like potatoes of computers and turn out some beautiful artwork because it really doesn't tax the system that much. Oh, there's a Hobbit one too. Very on. That's cool. Yeah, this is awesome.
I would recommend giving it a watch. Each clip is just seconds long, and like I said, it gets the joke in there, and then it's because it's 8-bit, it's able to loop seamlessly and just keep going, keep the gag going. It's pretty good.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can get more information about the show and links to some of the things that Stephen and I talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. Music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod. You can email the show at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com or follow the show by name on social media. Subscribe for free on all of the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. The RSS feed and show notes are available on our website, thecitadelcafe.com. Word of mouth is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell friends about the Citadel Cafe and where they can go to listen to it. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find links to everything that I am up to online at joelduggan.com. That includes my podcast about Minecraft at thespawnchunks.com. Follow me on social media at Joel Duggan and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Tuesday through Saturday at 1 o'clock Atlantic. That's UTC minus 4 hours for people around the world. Currently working on Minecraft, building on the Citadel server. Stardew Valley, my first playthrough started last week. And today, returned to Satisfactory for the first time since the holidays. So lots of fun stuff happening. including looking forward to some Lego on Fridays, although maybe not this week because I haven't ordered a new set yet. So we're down to the wire. But coming up, we'll be ordering a new set and doing some Lego on Fridays. Stephen, where can people find you online?
Been spending most of my time lately on either Blue Sky or Mastodon. I'm Stephen ESC on Blue Sky and Stephen ESC at mstdn.ca on Mastodon.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.